Okay, so I've had a couple people shoot me questions about what my thoughts were on the Wonder Woman selection. I think it's Gal Gadot. I probably pronounced that horribly. Some people are like she's too tall, she's too thin. So I started thinking about other women. People really wanted to go for Jamie Alexander, who's 5'9". Gal is 5'10". I was like, well, Lucy Lawless. She was great as Xena, and people really enjoyed her. She was 5'9". And I was like, okay, well, what about Linda Carter, the iconic Wonder Woman, 5'8"? So they're all relatively similar in height. I'd probably say 5'8" to 5'9" to 5'10" is a pretty close range. So like most people, I was like, well, let's see what she's been in. The Fast and Furious movies. I was like, alright. I've seen 4 and 5, haven't seen 6 yet. And I was like, well, do I recall her doing anything? I was like, I think she was the tall girl who was in the bikini, who had, like, one of the main villains, like, grab her butt to get the fingerprints. And she drove a car. Well, almost every woman drives a car in the Fast and Furious franchises. And I was like, okay, so what else has she done? Okay, she's one Miss Israel. Still not looking very good. At all. She did all of her own stunts in the Fast and Furious movies. Okay, that's interesting. You don't see that very often, someone doing all their own driving, all their own fight choreography. And she spent 2 years in the Israeli Special Forces. You know, because that's actually pretty decent. I mean, you know, she does have some overall chops. Now, I know some else people really were going after was, of course, Gina Carano. I think Gina Carano's a little on the shorter side because she's 5'8". Ironically, I do think if you were to look at those 3 women in particular, Gal, Gina, and Jamie, when you do the facial comparisons, Jamie has the closest face. You know, Wonder Woman normally has a more squarish jaw. Jamie has like the perfect jawline for it, as well as the hair. Of course, she's not blue-eyed, but you can contact that pretty easily. If you look at Gina Carano, Gina Carano has a much better overall physical build for the character, as well as a background in mixed martial arts. And she's just naturally a bigger girl, so she's got a lot more muscle definition to her. Now we'll go to Gal. I don't quite know what she did during her audition. It might be that she had some really great overall on-screen chemistry. Physically, I will go on good and say that she does need to beef up. She definitely does need to put on a decent amount of white muscle. I'm thinking, as opposed to dark muscle as there being more tone, I'm thinking she needs to put on a decent amount of muscle to pull off this character. When you look at Wonder Woman, she is, to quote Sheldon, beefy. She's kind of a bigger girl. And she's an Amazon. Actually, my favorite portrayal when it came to how they used to do Wonder Woman in comics, as well as in the cartoons, was the Darwyn Cooke version. You know, I like the fact that his Wonder Woman was taller than Superman. Not by a lot, but just enough to be noticeable. Just made her a much physically larger presence. A lot of people saying they wanted somebody who was really tall and really that almost brings it to like a Khloe Kardashian, or someone who could have that much larger physical presence. So think about it from that standpoint. For everyone who's complaining about Gal, I think that's her name, I'm probably butchering it horribly because it probably has some beautiful way that you say it, you know, with an Israeli accent. So picture her not having the role. Now picture it being Khloe Kardashian, who has the physical size for the role. Now all of a sudden Gal seems probably like a much better option. This one I'm more kind of on the fence with, because I have mentioned it's much more of a cameo. You know, it's Batman versus Superman, not Batman versus Superman, asterisk, oh, and by the way, we have Wonder Woman in this. But that also goes with the huge issue with bringing Wonder Woman into a movie. They're going to make a big deal out of it's going to be a cameo, people are going to be upset. If they say it's a cameo to tell you people kind of like it's going to be okay and it's larger than a cameo, people are going to be upset. If they pick somebody who doesn't have the physical chops for the role, people are upset. Then they pick somebody who has a tremendous background and a lot of film acting, and the films that she's been in are less than stellar when it comes to an overall acting acclimate, people are going to be upset. And I constantly read, Hunger Games did really well. Okay, Hunger Games is based off of a book trilogy. That's a very linear storyline. If Hunger Games were to have been a monthly book that's been out for, over 50 years, then that'd be impressive. And if Hunger Games were to have gone through a revision every 10 to 15 years where the design of the character has changed, the background is tweaked, where everything about the character is modified a little bit, then I'd see it being a pretty close comparison. I've heard lots of people say, that there's this idea that the men in Hollywood don't want to have strong female characters. So it's not like I can point to any film franchises, with the exception of Twilight, which we should never ever quote as being a fantastic film franchise dealing with women. So I can't say anything like the Underworld series, which is always headed by women, or the Resident Evil series, which is headed up by women. The Tomb Raider series, which again, headed up by women. Probably shouldn't say anything about The Fifth Element, which didn't do well in the box office, but had a tremendous following as a cult film later on, which had a very strong female character. What it comes down to more is the amount of money that you put into a comic book character. You can't do Wonder Woman for 50 mil. You really couldn't do it justice and do a really small budget. And the more budget you put into it, the more Hollywood is going to make as much money as possible off of it. They've learned. Green Lantern made money once it came to the DVD market. Man of Steel made money before it hit DVDs. But it didn't make Thor money. It didn't make Iron Man money. It didn't make Avengers money. The Dark Knight made a tremendous amount of money. It made like mere Avengers money. And it cost a little bit less to make. That's what, when they make a superhero film, Hollywood wants to hit that super huge high price point. They're not going to make a $100 million movie and be like, well, we made 200. Yay. They want to make a $200 million movie and make $700 million. They want to make a tremendous amount of money. They want to be able to turn that $1 into $3 and $4, not that $1 to $2. And if you look, it's pretty easy to go, well, Daredevil, decent flick. The unrated, the extended version is phenomenally better, but decent flick. Introduced Elektra. Electric had her own single movie, with Jennifer Garner at the time was a fairly popular female star, and guess what? It didn't do well. Didn't do well at all. Okay? Catwoman. Had nothing at all to do with the comics, but it was made as a movie, and it was horrible. Started seeing a pattern here. It's difficult for them to take a character like that and make them have a really good, strong presence. I've heard, well, Thor worked. Okay, Thor worked because of Loki. Think about it. When you watch the first Thor movie, Thor was kind of a bumbling idiot. When he came down to Earth, he was just kind of a goofy sort of guy. It almost felt more like a romantic comedy with bits and pieces of superhero action thrown into it. Okay, now I want you to picture that. Now, switch the genders of those two roles. Now put Wonder Woman in the kind of stupid, kind of dopey role. Doesn't it feel like it's exactly every romantic comedy you've ever seen? Where you've got a woman who's strong, who's successful, who's independent, who meets a guy she really likes and then becomes a complete and total idiot for about the next hour in the movie. Do you want Wonder Woman Now, the most iconic female character to fall into a movie kind of like that, I mean, it would just be such a horrible thing to do. Or instead, do you go with one of the kind of middle of the road budgets, kind of half-hearted style way of trying to do one of these movies? It also hurts her too that she doesn't have the greatest rogues gallery. I mean, when you think Green Lantern, you have Sinestro. When you think Superman, you've got Lex Luthor. When you think Batman, you have the Joker. All these characters have pretty good, pretty solid, villains. The Avengers. Oh, you've got a whole host of villains you can do there. Now, we're going to go back. Think of the first Hulk movie, where Hulk fought a kind of an absorbing man style character that was horrible. Now, Hulk Abomination. Great. That worked. That worked beautifully. Now, thinking of Wonder Woman, you have the Cheetah, Circe. You could kind of do the Firstborn. You could make it a lot more about the Greek pantheon and throw in a lot more different sorts of gods and all that. And then just make sure you don't get it to the point that it feels like you're watching a woman in Percy Jackson, which at the same time dealt with a similar mythology of gods and didn't do well in the box office for the amount of money that was put into it. Again, comparing that to the Harry Potter franchise. There's a lot of negative things going for it financially when it comes to Wonder Woman. It's a very untested product. The amount of money to be made isn't as great as people keep on thinking that it is. Like, oh, well, Hunger Games made a ton of money. Okay, Hunger Games specifically geared towards a specific audience that has bought a tremendous amount of the books. And the book is pretty easy to translate into film. The Lord of the Rings book, film worked well. Green Lantern, over 405 issues before Jeff Johns jumped on. And it became a movie that tried to do so many different things that it was just a hot mess. It's really easy to go, well, you can totally do this. No. You have to do it right. They wouldn't let Joss Whedon do it after his successful run with Buffy. Ironically, when it comes to female-led movies, it tends to be almost more of the sci-fi, more of the supernatural sort of movies, because it seems to be easier for people to go along with that. When Haywire came out, the Gina Carano movie, people thought it was stupid. How could this girl beat up a guy? Because she's a highly trained assailant? I mean, if she's someone who's trained by the government to do these sorts of things, and she's one of their best, it would make sense that she could defeat a man. Some people, this is the general public, just couldn't get their idea around. They're like, oh, she's small. Okay, she's 5'8" and a professional fighter. I'm 6'3", like 220 pounds. I'm pretty sure if I fought a female professional fighter, she would beat the crap out of me. If you did two people of similar skill level, and you had to be a man or a woman, might be a different story. But when they showed her beating up people who were not at her level physically, or when it came to fighting ability, it made sense. People still complained about that. Now, picture Wonder Woman, someone who has been shown to go toe-to-toe with someone like Superman. That's going to be difficult for a large portion of the populace to get. Comic book fans, totally used to it. They're used to seeing women who are very strong, very large in life, defeat male characters. Not something you see a lot of when it comes to movies that are currently playing.